Welcome to the Pride of Detroit POD cast. The POD is for postmortem. There's no D in postmortem, but I'm going to pronounce it like there is one. PrideOfDetroit.com, Pride of Detroit on Twitter, Pride of Detroit on Facebook, live on twitch.tv/Pride of Detroit. As we come here, what's the line from Julius Caesar? Not to eulogize Caesar, but to bury him. I don't know. Whatever. I thought I was a Shakespeare expert, and to be honest, I'm too shaken from this game. I also woke up with a squirrel in my face on Saturday. More on that in a break. But we have a lot to dig up for this team. We have a lot of problems to talk about for this team. Festivus came early, and it's time to just completely just. This was the game where the bow broke on all the feel good, all the upbeat, on all the I will take ownership. There's some stormy vibes ahead. But Pride of Detroit is always about therapy, first and foremost. And I am your unlicensed practitioner, Christopher Fett, at Christopher Fett on Twitter, and I cannot help you get pills. With me, as always, Jeremy Reisman, the fearless leader, the producer of Pride of Detroit, Jeremy Reisman, at Detroit Online, who I'm sure has many fears today.
Fear is definitely not the primary emotion I'm feeling currently.
Rage?
Pissed off is pretty close, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like we've done this podcast before.
Too many fucking times.
Yes, too many times.
And sorry, this is going to get the explicit rating this week because...
Yes, it is.
I'm not holding back. There's no reason to hold back.
There's really not. Ryan Matthews, at Ryan_POD, senior editor, is also in here, sad and pissed off as well, I'm sure.
Go Pistons.
Is it that time of year?
Go Red Wings.
On to the next hype train, onto the next hype vehicle.
Let's go Red Wings.
Okay. I feel like we do this too many times. And unfortunately, we have to do it again here because this is a loss that this is the 2-punch in a 1-2 punch from the Seahawks game. First, you lose in the Seahawks game the way you lose, giving 48 points, that offense led by Geno Smith. Then you come to this game, and you set an NFL record for failed fourth down conversions at 0 for 6, record that stood for about 27 years. And you give Bailey Zappi, a third-string quarterback, and a rookie short field to work with, and your defense is beyond banged up. So there's a lot to unwind from this. I don't know how long this podcast is going to go because, to be honest, I don't know how long it's going to take for us to just burn out from rage and frustration. So I'm just going to hand it over to Jeremy because I feel like I need to go to the leader for... Just Jeremy, what you want me?
If you're looking for inspiration,
what do you got, buddy?
I'm not looking for inspiration. I'm looking for the sword.
I mean, I don't know. You went into this week hoping that the Lions were going to have some sort of miracle turnaround on defense like they did on offense last year. You were hoping that they would come into this game offensively and do what they do well. And listen, like, this game was not out of hand in the first half. It was 6-0. And you had the ball in Patriots territory late in the second half. And I know there's going to be a lot of talk about going for it on 4th and 9, and rightfully so. That was kind of Dan Campbell at his most extreme. And if you're going to kick Austin Seibert to the curb for missing a couple of field goals in one game and not trust the guy that you bring in for him for a 50-yarder, you're not even going to give him a shot in a game that was, we all knew, Ryan, we knew this was going to be a game in which we were going to grind out possessions. It was going to be low scoring. And so you don't need to do this Rams game plan where you're planning for a shootout. The game was under control. And listen, I'm not going to let Jared Goff off the hook for this week because it's one thing to go for it on 4th and 9. It's another thing to do exactly what he did, which was crap his pants when there was pressure. Over and over and over and over again. And listen,
fourth and two in a 1-yard pass to Amon-Ra St. Brown is incomprehensible.
That coaching is a whole nother issue because the 4th down conversions weren't on Jared Goff. They were on horrible, ridiculously. Jamal Williams at fullback, who didn't see that one coming that he was going to get the ball? It's ridiculous. But I mean, I don't know where to start, man. Like, there's just so much rattling in my head, and the primary emotion that I'm looking at the New York Giants 4-1. I'm looking at the New York Jets 3-2. How come all of these rebuilds take a lot quicker, and we have to sit here and be like, well, let's fold our hands. Well, give them another year. Like, we're getting worse. We're getting worse. The defense is getting worse. The offense, maybe not as good as we thought it was. Jared Goff's certainly not as good as a lot of people seem to think he was. So I don't know where we go from here, man. Because it's not like you take that gif of Dan Campbell after the win. Oh, we're all trending up. Certainly doesn't look like it to me, man. Certainly doesn't look like it to me. Where's this team trending up right now? Where is the source of hope right now?
Well, it was the offense, right? How many points did they score today?
Same as you did.
Good point. Yeah, you had a tweet, Jeremy, where you said, I don't know where this team goes from here, man. And I joked and I said, this tweet was actually saved from your drafts, October 31st, 2021. Back right when the Lions laid an egg against the Philadelphia Eagles. This is way worse. This is much worse. You know why? Because we're a full off season away from that. Why? Exactly to your point, Jeremy. Why isn't this team? Why are other rebuilds taking hold versus this rebuild right now that seems to be painstakingly terrible? Like the Lions, for all intents and purposes, should not be sitting at 1-4 heading into the bye.
This was supposed to be the easy part of the schedule.
I maintain they are a better team than the Patriots. I do. I think if this game hadn't gotten out of hand, they should have been able to settle. Like they were they were almost outplaying them in the first half. It's just.
Can I tell you what though?
On a short, forgiving their offense short fields with fourth down conversions and not pinning them by punting them deep. The Patriots. Hold on. My point is that the defense. There's problems with the defense, but they kept except for one offensive touchdown, they kept the Patriots out of the end zone. To your point, that's why I'm saying like it was winnable because bend don't break was happening. Bend don't break was happening on defense.
Sure,
even with the offense doing them no favors.
Can we rub our own shoulders right now? Can we kind of like wax poetically about like what we do here at Pride of Detroit? Because when we did First Bite with Hayden S. Bryan. And he was like, Kyle Duggar's really good. He's going to lock down TJ Hawkinson. Where was he today? Oh, yeah, that's right. He showed up on the stat sheet when he caught a pass in the fourth quarter. And then he showed up earlier in the stat sheet when he had a holding penalty on a first down run. That was TJ Hawkinson's afternoon. And what did Kyle Duggar do today, Jeremy?
I believe he had a touchdown.
He did.
Touchdown.
He did. Scored a touchdown on defense. This game was 6-0, like well into the second quarter. Like this game felt like it was still well within reach until halftime. Like halftime happened and then the Lions were down 16-0 and it was like, well, maybe some adjustments at halftime.
That's what makes it so fucking disappointing, right? Is like we've been trained by this coaching staff to this team, never gives up. They fight so hard.
Grit.
I listened on the radio broadcast and I heard Lomas Brown use the words in that fourth quarter that it looks like this is the kind of game where you just give up, or like not those exact words, but to that point, to your point there, like this is a team that's not supposed to quit, and it looks like they just threw in the towel for this one.
And I'm sorry, but this isn't the first time this has happened in Dan Campbell's era. I know we all like to point to how last year finished, but there were a couple blowouts last year too. This isn't.
Well, there were plenty of them. Yeah.
Like this is a team that doesn't always fight. And listen, I'm gonna say it. Like I was not concerned about losing the locker room up until today. Now I'm a little concerned about it because listen, the Lions made some unpopular decisions in the coaching staff today in the secondary. They benched some guys. It came back to bite them in the ass. I'm not going to completely fault them for that because who was going to know that 5 guys were going to get injured in the secondary? That said, not only benching Amani, but making him inactive was a risk. And Campbell's response was, "He didn't play special teams for us, so whatever." Great. But you need a backup. You need a guy who can play defense out there. And you trusted a lot of guys who've never been out there before. And it ended up biting you in the ass. And listen, as much as I wanted to dismiss it, that Savion Smith Instagram story, that Deshaun Elliott Instagram story saying he wants to get the fuck out of Detroit, and he just so happens to get benched at the beginning, like to start this game, I suddenly don't think that's a coincidence. And if your safeties are saying that in the middle of the week and putting it on their burner Instagrams, maybe we got an issue.
I want to go back to Ryan. You said something about last year before going into the bye with that Eagles game.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is worse going into this bye because unlike that year, we could at least point to one vector that was causing the most problems for the team back then. It was the offense. It was the play calling with Anthony Lynn. And it was, it was controversial and it didn't work right out of the gate with Dan Campbell, but they at least had a plan to resolve what was going on. There is no quick fix for this team right now going into the bye. You have to rip out like the entire foundation at this point. You can't do that midseason.
I mean, once again, I know we're talking about all the injuries that happened in the secondary. There's no DeAndre Swift. Amon-Ra St. Brown was questionable all week. He had an ankle injury.
And he was on a bit of a pitch count, yeah.
Josh Reynolds had an ankle injury that clearly cropped up by the end of this game. Like, he was feeling it by the end of the day. I mean, this offense has been hampered by injuries as well. And what they were able to do last week against Seattle was a little fugazi. I mean, I think that Ben Johnson schemed up a great game last week against Seattle. He also got some pretty darn good performances out of some players. But man, like, I'm really at a loss. I really don't know because to your original point, Chris, when the Lions headed into the bye week last year after the Philadelphia game, there was at least a sense of, I mean, this is what Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes inherited from Quinn Tricia. Like, this is what they inherited, and they've had to, tear it down all the way down to the bearings, and they had to rebuild it back up. Expectations changed. They really did. And with the way that the Lions started this season, they looked competitive, at least against the Eagles. They beat a bad team in Washington. And just the wheels have fallen off since then. Like, and it's hard to pinpoint blame, but injuries have decimated this football team.
Sure.
Like, truthfully, like, I mean, the depth. Think about this, guys. When we headed into this season, Amani Oruwariye was the team's number one cornerback. Throughout training camp, throughout preseason, he was the team's number one cornerback. There was a competition between Will Harris and Jeff Okudah. Like, I'm not misremembering this. Amani Oruwariye was a healthy scratch today.
I mean, I don't know what else to say, man. Like,
wasn't even a question. So I'm sorry to try to, I'm sorry to try to like proposition you guys with nothing, but it's like, I'm just trying to like, here are the facts. Like, okay, with this being known, where do we go from here? But that's why I pointed out your tweet, Jeremy. Like, where do we go from here? Right. Because I'm trying to make sense of all of it. I know that's what we're all trying to do right now, is to make sense of it, but it seems incomprehensible with what's going on right now.
It remains and is becoming more apparent, to your point, that I think the theme running through it is the coaching decisions are just bewildering. There's little sense to the continued aggression in the face of just you being schemed for it and getting just your pants pulled down by Bill Belichick. There's no sense in what happened with Oruwariye when you knew this team was already hurting. And like, the last thing people want to hear is Dan Campbell once again going up to the podium and saying, "This one's on me." Like, yeah, we know. And that's the problem, man. That's what I mean. Like, where I feel grim after this game because it feels like any trace of the feel good, of the Ted Lasso, of the positivity, of everything that was kind of going through. I'm not blaming Hard Knocks for this. I'm just like that. That's always what it was. What it was for a year and change. For a year and a half of this team was, this is the message out here, and that's all evaporated. There's not a damn trace of it left right now. Maybe to Jeremy's point, I can't speak to the locker room. I don't want to hypothesize about it. But if it is losing it, if it is starting to be lost, then man, like, I don't know. I thought Dan Campbell would make 3 years. I don't. And I know this is easy to say after the second of two very historic losses, but especially in losses that go completely different directions. When you go from, hey, your defense can't stop a cold to, hey, your offense can't do anything. Like there's nothing here. There's nothing here, and it feels like it needs to be hollowed out again, and that sucks because I always worried that if Dan Campbell failed, it would break fans in a really bad way. And guess what? I'm kind of seeing it right now. Fans are being broken in a really bad way.
They are, for sure. I think there was an inherent trust. He's an easy guy to like. I think he's a smart guy. He's a charismatic guy. He's a good leader. And to be clear, I am not calling for anyone to get fired right now.
No, none of us are calling for that. That is not something we do on this podcast.
But
I know plenty of people in the market are going to have that take. But yes, go on, Jeremy.
I think I wish I could see the defensive turnaround that we saw with the offensive turnaround. And listen, they weren't going to do it in a week, right? They dug up the roster, they dug up the scheme over this week, and they made a bunch of changes. It didn't work. And I think it's worth pointing out, last year when they made all those offensive changes midweek, it didn't work right away, right? I think the first game out of the bye was that Steelers game, which was maybe one of the ugliest games we've ever seen, including this one.
Yes.
So we need to give it all a little bit more time, but I'm not willing to give it that much more time, right? Like I know there are injuries. I know some guys might come back, and I know all that sort of stuff. And I see you pointing at your wrist. Relax.
No, I'm saying clock is ticking.
Yes,
that's what okay. I'm not saying that you're out of time for this. I am letting you rant. I'm saying I'm trying to do a thing where I'm like, the clock is ticking for Dan Campbell.
Yeah, it is. And we came into the season knowing like the honeymoon is over. And to me, it's not just that the team is bad. It's that it's regressing. It's getting worse. And you could look at this game a little closer and say, well, the defense was a little bit better than last week. And you wouldn't necessarily be lying. I think at times the run defense looked good. The final stat line sure doesn't look that way. Pass defense, I can't say anything positive about when you let Bailey Zappi complete 70% of his passes and basically have no issues getting out of pass rush or anything like that. But you could point at this and be like, okay, maybe it was a step in the right direction for the defense. But to take such a huge step back on offense, and to me, the problem isn't the aggression. I don't mind going for it 6 times on fourth down. The 4th and 9 was really the only questionable one for me. It's the play calling on fourth down. It's the throwing to Amon-Ra out of the backfield when everyone can see that coming. When Khalif Raymond is streaking downfield wide open because everyone is collapsing on your one playmaker. It's putting Jamal Williams at fullback. And anyone think you're going to give it to Craig Reynolds in that situation? No, you're going to give it to your power back. Everyone sees that one coming. It's Jared Goff taking a huge step back when anytime there's any bit of pressure, he's trying, whatever bad moves he has to get out of pressure and eventually throwing it away 10 feet out of bounds instead of stepping up and just firing one into someone, trying to at least give someone a chance to make a play out there.
Jeremy, to your point, I think a lot of people on Twitter, they started piling on people. And I know that, like, if you speak ill of Jared Goff, there's a whole faction of people with pitchforks that are ready to fight.
To go.
Yeah, they're ready to fight back against you. It's not that like Jared Goff is always making the wrong decision. It's just that in situations where things can get worse, Jared Goff exacerbates the problem. Like he makes things worse. So, hey, all right. So through the first few weeks, Jared Goff was making like uncharacteristic decisions and was showing an ability to like escape pressure that like we hadn't seen throughout an entire year, right? Like I think that we came on this podcast and we were like, oh, Jared Goff is like he's making decisions in the pocket in terms of his pocket awareness. He's like moving around in the spots that he should be moving around. And then today it was 180.
Right.
It was Jared Goff like
wagon.
It was Jared Goff doing his little 180 turn and like spinning back, and it was just again, to your point, Jeremy, it's regression, right? It's regression, and it's moving backwards. And yes, I'll be the first one to also admit I thought pass pro was terrible in this game.
Probably the worst game I've seen out of the offensive line in a minute.
You know, we kind of like we raised an eyebrow, Jeremy, to like the 5 questions that, you know, Pat's Pulpit answered for us, where they said like, oh, the Patriots pass rush is exceptional. It's like, oh, is it? Because it doesn't look so on paper. And then we all showed up to Sunday and we saw Matthew Judon, as Jonathan Vilma kept on saying, taking other people's lunch and living rent free in Taylor Decker's head, and then in Penei Sewell's head. And then it was, I mean, goodness gracious, it was not good. It was not good. The Detroit's strength certainly was not it today, right? Because it's their offensive line.
Yep.
And like they were very committed to running the football all throughout this game, even when they were down by multiple scores. Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson were like, we're going to keep running the football. Because they couldn't pass it. They couldn't throw the football.
Yeah, I have thoughts on like this feels like the game. I know everyone's tried to bury him, but like this was the game where Bill Belichick, like he's seen Jared Goff before and he knows exactly how to get him off his sorts. And he's seen the Lions before. He knew exactly where to hit him.
Well, easy, Chris, because Matt Patricia and the Lions gave Bill Belichick and the Patriots the blueprint to stopping Jared Goff.